Hello, today I'm taking a look at the Bogan, which is an Australian Shiraz from the Barossa Valley from a producer called Kaesler, and this is the 2020 vintage of that. Kaesler, a company started by a Silesian family, very typical of the Barossa Valley, Silesian settlers coming to the valley in the 1840s. By the 1890s they were able to buy land. They bought 93 acres of land which they turned into vineyards, planting it very, very quickly, and planting with what would be viewed as southern French varieties, so Shiraz, Grenache, Mourvedre, and a variety they call White Hermitage, which I assume was Marsanne. The Silesians farmed the land there for nearly 100 years. They actually finally sold in 1986, and the vineyard was in different hands for a while, and then in 1999 it was bought by two men, an entrepreneur, Ed Peter, and a winemaker, Reed Bosworth, who was an established winemaker, and they had some quite visionary ideas for the property. They recognised the fact that there were these wonderful old vines on the estate growing concentrated fruit. I mean, the oldest plot was in fact from 1893, and there were several sort of 1895 and 1899 plots. In fact, the overall age of vines was 40 years plus. So all mature, all producing concentrated fruit, presumably all dry farmed as well. So they set about producing a sort of a much more marketing-led range of wines, which I guess the Bogan is part of. So at the top of the scale, they have a wine called Old Bastard, which is rated as one of the iconic Barossa Valley Shirazes. They also have another wine called Alte Reben, the German for old vines. They have another Shiraz called Old Vines, and then below that in the sort of scale of quality comes the Bogan, but still a high quality Barossa Valley Shiraz. Just to explain a Bogan, I think it's a great piece of marketing, really. A Bogan is an uncouth, unsophisticated person in Australian slang. They'll be loud, they'll be brash. It's not really a term of endearment, but I think it sort of sums up this wine. This is not a subtle wine at all. The wine, as I say, old vine, concentrated fruit, would have been hand-picked, I'd guess. Ages for 16 months in oak after fermentation. About a third of that is new, about 30% in fact, and the balance in second and third fill oak. So there should be big fruit, reasonable oak influence, and quite a typical Australian Shiraz. So let's see what we make of this, or Barossa Valley Shiraz even, I should say, sorry. First of all, the colour. The colour's got a lovely depth, it's deep. I can actually see through it. It's not quite opaque, but it's a purple-red colour mostly, with a quite a vivid purple rim showing the wine's youth. And as I've swirled it, there's quite dark-coloured tears falling down the glass. The tears are unsurprising. The wine says it on its label that it's 15% alcohol, so it's not a subtle wine, as I think we've been warned. Smelling it, and I should say, actually, it's just been filling the room with its aroma. This is a wine that's bouncing out of the glass almost. Smelling it, it's a ripe, very ripe red to black fruit. You've got sort of touches, I guess, of ripe mulberry and ripe red plum, but actually moving over into the black cherry, black plum, damson, bullace, those sort of notes. But in each case, sort of slightly at the high end of ripeness there. So black cherry, almost a sort of black olivey sort of note, in terms of it's so ripe it's almost getting savoury, and the black plum notes almost having a sort of a pruny sort of edge there in terms of high ripeness. Maybe the French would refer to it as surmaturité, over maturity. So a real fruit intensity there. Behind that, there are some other notes. There's a slight milkiness. There's also a distinct hint of mintiness, a sort of eucalypt note that is classic for some Australian Shirazes. There are slightly toasty, slightly cedary notes, and that brings out a peppery note on the finish there. So there's plenty going on in the aroma, and the aromas are good and intense. So that's for taste. That's mouth-filling, very rounded, smooth, ripe, quite full-bodied. The alcohol's warm, but actually it's not hot on the back palate because the fruit has lovely concentration, and there is a freshness to it as well. I wouldn't say it's particularly high acidity, but there's enough acidity to lift sort of some beautiful ripe mulberry notes out of the fruit, although the fruit is mostly towards the sort of red to black cherry end of things, the darker plum note. But again, as I say, that lovely freshness keeping it going there. The alcohol's giving a little bit of warmth and roundness to the finish. But the finish is actually sort of finishing with that lovely fresh mulberry note because there's enough acidity to lift it. It's lasting reasonably well. The tannins, the plentiful tannins, I mean, it's got a big structure, but they're so smooth. I'd start by sort of saying that they were velvety, but actually they're smoother than that. They're heading on towards a much more sort of silky note. There's almost a chocolatey texture to it, and maybe that's where the sort of the slight milky note, sort of a slight milk chocolate touch there. And again, on the finish, you can also see a tiny bit of that pepperiness that you'd expect from perhaps from a Shiraz. It's a very clean, well presented fruit. The flavours are lasting well. So yes, I think it's doing what it's promising it will. This is a full throttle, rich, rounded, but unlike its namesake, the Bogan, actually quite appealing Australian Shiraz from the Barossa Valley. So I hope you found this interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and do join us again. Bye now.